Hello everyone, this is 19th of December and we are going to discuss the key events of the day. This is news today. I'm going to first take you through the headlines and then we'll describe all the different articles, all the important events, discuss them one by one. Let's start with the main news headlines. The first one is NPS DRR initiatives to develop cluster-based model gram panchayats. This has been approved. Then the Committee on External Affairs presented Future of India-Bangladesh Relationship Report in the Lok Sabha. After that, live-in relationships are not illegal. This has come from the Allahabad High Court. Then you have action taken report on 6th of the Committee of External Affairs, Indian Diaspora Overseas. This has been released. So the Committee on External Affairs has released a report on Indian Diaspora Overseas. Then India and Oman signed Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement. Along with this, there are some quick updates which we have to talk about, which we have to look into. So those quick updates are Competition Commission of India. Then we talk about hate speech. Then Coal Controller Organization, autophagy. Then the Commission for Air Quality Management, freshwater sponges, anti-dumping duty, small modular reactor. And the place in news today is Netherlands. So one by one, we talk about all of them. Let's start with the first main news here. So this is NPS DRR's initiative to develop cluster-based model gram panchayats. This has been approved. Now, this is a very significant thing which has happened because this is related to disaster reduction, disaster risk reduction, national project for strengthening disaster risk reduction. Till now, most of the plans which are there, which talk about disaster management, disaster preparedness, disaster risk assessment, they've been limited to the urban areas. But this is now a step of preparing our villages for those disasters, because that makes a lot of sense as they are the most vulnerable whenever a disaster strikes. So this is a bottom-up approach. Right at the grassroots level, you're going to be prepared to manage different kinds of disasters. Now, what is this project about? So let's see. So the implementation of this is being done by the Ministry of Panchayati Raj and National Disaster Management Authority. Of course, disaster is their expertise, so they are going to be involved. Then the plan is that you're going to cover 20 states with 81 disaster-prone districts. From those 20 states, 81 districts are going to be selected. And from each of those districts, there will be 20 gram panchayats each. Okay, 20 gram panchayats are going to be selected and they are going to do a cluster-based approach. So one model gram panchayat they are going to set up and the other gram panchayats, they are going to be linked to that model gram panchayat. So that exemplary model is going to be tried at one place, and then of course, there is this scope of repeating it, doing the same thing in other gram panchayats. So there's a cluster-based approach. The gram panchayat and model panchayats have to be located in close clusters. The introduction of the gram panchayat concept, model gram panchayat concept. So what they say is that one for each of the 20 states for 6 different hazards. For each of these states, there are going to be one model gram panchayat, and they've selected 6 different hazards, 6 different hazards against which they're going to be preparing this system. So there is going to be one gram panchayat for each hazard in each state. That is the plan under this project. The concept is basically affirming the idea that for disaster management, community-based activity works very well, because the people who are on the ground, who are going to be impacted, if they are prepared, if they are trained, that is what is going to really reduce the risk, minimize the damage. So here we talk about this idea in a lot of your disaster management answers, this concept will fit very well. Community based disaster risk reduction. So this says there is participation, so participatory risk assessment at all different steps here, from the beginning to actually doing the things which are supposed to be done after the disaster, right? To long term restoration, for all the steps community participation will happen. So for risk assessment, planning, effective information dissemination, local knowledge, contextual understanding. See, the locals are the best people to understand the context of a place, understand the issues of a place, and of any disasters which might come. So, their knowledge, their information can be very helpful. And they are also the first responders at various stages of disaster management. Now, this is taking inspiration from the Sendai framework. So, this is an international framework for disaster risk reduction, which has set its system, given its guidelines for 2015 to 2030. So, this specifically talks about community based disaster risk reduction. Okay, so we are taking in motivation from that and applying it to our national setup at our very grassroots, that is our villages, our gram panchayats. And then they mentioned one more scheme here. So there is the Apada Mitra, which is a scheme for training community volunteers for disaster response. So when a disaster happens, you need a force which is on the ground, which is going to have the training through this one specific government scheme. And of course, under this national project, the whole idea has been incorporated. We come to the next article. So there's a committee on external affairs which has presented its report in the Lok Sabha, and this is a report on future of India-Bangladesh relationship. So Bangladesh is a neighbor for India, and Bangladesh has been a very close ally of India. So India has been instrumental in actually creation of Bangladesh. So that the friendship is as long as the existence of Bangladesh. But recently, if you've been tracking the events, there has been a government overthrow in Bangladesh. And with that, the situation has really changed. So India also needs to examine that dynamic and prepare itself accordingly. So this is a report which talks about that. So the report has highlighted some challenges which this India-Bangladesh relationship is experiencing, and accordingly then it will also be giving some recommendations that what should be the future of this relationship. So let's see. First is strategic realignment. Now that the government has changed, the alignment, the affirmation, the relationship is changed. So that's one challenge which we are facing. Then because of this disturbance in that country, there are security threats. So you have illegal migration, you have cross-border terrorism, which can happen through this, especially because, a lot of this border of India and Bangladesh, it's not exactly fenced. Like you have mountain ranges in between, you have rivers which are there in that border region. So their fencing is not possible. So then, because of those porous borders, these issues become very significant. Then you have economic barriers and trade imbalances. See, India has trade agreements, trade treaties with Bangladesh, but currently what's happening is that most of the incentives India is only giving. It's not really balanced. We're not getting a lot of help from Bangladesh in that. Then water sharing and environmental crisis. So there is this key river, Ganga. Okay. So there's a Ganga water treaty also, which is now going to expire. So we brought this treaty in 1996 and it's going to expire in the coming 2026 December. Now, there is no discussion on renewing this treaty, on further negotiation of how water sharing will work on River Ganga. So, this is going to be an added challenge considering we already have so many river disputes like the Teesta River, and there are many other multiple locations where there is a dispute in water sharing. So, this is one more thing which is going to be added on to that. Then China's expanding presence. So China is one not very friendly neighbor of India, and China is trying to have increasing presence in Bangladesh, and a lot of those structures or infrastructure developments which China is going to be doing, they might be used against India. So we are very cautious about that, about what kind of development or what kind of involvement China is having with Bangladesh. So that's another challenge we have to deal with. Then you have strategic recommendations for the future. So the committee has given some reports. Now, what are the suggestions here, the recommendations, what how things should move in the future? So first is sustained diplomatic engagement. So through different channels, India should, have its diplomatic engagement so that, with this new government, this new system which has come up, they're able to get through and, realign their interests. Then modernization of border management. So there are a lot of technological border management aspects which can be tried, like you have different types of sensors and drones and different ways of surveillance which can help in protecting the borders, because borders we've just discussed is a matter of contention. Then economic safeguards. Accelerate negotiation on comprehensive economic partnership agreement with strict rules of origin verification to prevent third party misuse. Okay, so India has this comprehensive economic partnership agreement with a number of countries. We'll talk about one such agreement today with a different country. But the point here, which is becoming significant when it comes to Bangladesh, is the third party misuse. So, what's happening is, like, let's say India has an agreement with Bangladesh that, okay, we will buy all your goods without putting any duty on them, without putting any tax on them. Now, a lot of the goods there are coming from China, and those Chinese goods are then entering India through taking the benefit of these treaties. So that's a third party with which we don't have that kind of a relationship. So it's kind of a disadvantage for us, because otherwise, if the goods from China had directly come, we would have put some duty, some tax on them. So this misuse is what needs to be strictly controlled. This is not in India's interest. Then proactive water and climatic diplomacy. Renewal talks for the Ganga Water Treaty. That is what we just spoke about. And as per the current hydrological and climate data, joint adaptation. So there are other concerns also in other regions like Sundarbans, and with climate change and deforestation, a lot of problems are being exaggerated, and because this is a shared territory, a shared resource, so it has to be addressed jointly. So that is what needs attention. Further, we can go to our next issue. It's a social issue which all of you understand. We're going to talk about the legal position here with live-in relationships. So, live-in relationships, the Allahabad High Court says, is not illegal. There is no provision on the law which makes it illegal. And let's see how this was decided and what are the observations of the court. Okay, so from the point of view of Indian society paper, this can be an aspect. So whenever you are writing about such an issue, it's not your personal opinion which would really make a lot of sense in your answers. If you can enforce it with some constitutional backing, with some court's reference, then that kind of gets more credibility. So let's see what the court is saying. So the court here is talking about the legality of this whole issue. So the court has clarified that live-in relationships between consenting adults are neither criminal nor they are forbidden under any Indian law. Okay, so they are not criminal. Then autonomy. So it has reaffirmed that adults are free to make personal life choice, and such autonomy cannot be restricted merely due to social or family disapproval. So even if the society doesn't approve or somebody's family doesn't approve, it's still a matter of personal choice and it has to be respected. You cannot curtail it. Then what is the point of the state? What is the state duty? The judgment emphasizes that denial of police protection in such cases amounts to failure of the state as constitutional obligation to safeguard life and liberty. So the state is required to protect such citizens who are at any kind of threat with any of the parties which are not approving this live-in relationship, and it's an obligation, it's a constitutional obligation for the police to safeguard these citizens. As far as the social aspect is concerned, the court has held that there are concerns about the social fabric, but it cannot override, even if those concerns are there, the fundamental guarantees in the constitution, where personal choice is key. So personal liberty is important here. They are kind of bringing into light Article 21 of the Constitution here. The court has also taken an evidentiary presumption. That just means that a reference from an existing law, which doesn't directly talk about it, but indirectly will kind of prove that, okay, this situation is fine. So this they have referred to, there's a section 114 of the Indian Evidence Act and section 119 subpart 1 of the Bharatiya Sakshay Adhinyayan 2023, which states that if a couple lives together for a significant period of time, then as husband and wife, they shall be presumed to be married. So this is a couple who lives together. So this, under this act, under this rule, they are considered to be husband and wife. They are considered to be married. So this is basically was given to secure the rights of the women in such relationship and the children who were born through such relationships. So if this is being equated to marriage and this is being allowed, then that kind of proves the legality of this relationship. Now there are some other Supreme Court judgments also, right? You don't need all these specifics, but this will give you an idea in the direction of how this issue is. And if you have to write any answers, you should also know that such substantiation gives a lot of weight to your answer. So first is Lata Singh versus State of Uttar Pradesh. The Supreme Court directed state authorities to protect adults exercising their choice of a partner. And basically this is again honor based violence. So there is, I'm sure you've heard about honor killings, which happens when families disapprove of a relationship. So here they are saying that the people are allowed to exercise their right of choosing a partner, and the state has to protect against honor based violence. Then K.S. Puttaswamy versus Union of India. So here the Supreme Court has upheld Article 21 that protects the right of privacy, dignity and autonomy in decisional freedom for personal and intimate matters. And this is of course a very personal matter. Then Shafeen Jahan versus Ashokan KM and others. The Supreme Court held that the right to marry of a person of his choice is an integral part of Article 21. Okay, so they take reference for them. Here it might not exactly be marriage, but when there's a right to marry, there's also a right not to marry, right? So that is what the concept is here. Then we talk about the action taken report on the 6th report of the Committee of External Affairs on Indian Diaspora overseas released. Okay, so there was a report on Indian diaspora. Now there's an action taken report on that what action was taken, what has happened, and the specific issue here is the Indian diaspora overseas. Okay, so we'll understand what is Indian diaspora, and then we go into the issues which they are facing. This is a specific topic in your main syllabus, GS paper 2. This is written literally, so you should know this is an important concept. So, Indian diaspora is a generic term to describe the people who have migrated from territories currently within the border of India and their descendants. So, any people who originally lived in India, but now they don't live in India, they live somewhere else, in some other country, or the descendants of people whose parents lived in India but are now no longer in India. They are all called as the diaspora. And in India, I'm sure you know, there are so many people who go abroad and settle abroad, and there are sometimes multiple generations, 3 generations, 4 generations also of families who have been settled in different parts of the world. So, in this, there are different terms which are used for them. So you have NRIs. I'm sure you've heard these terms, non-resident Indians, then persons of Indian origin, then overseas citizens of India, and you have migrant workers. So all of them combined, currently the population is around 35.42 million. So this is January 24's data. So this is a huge population, and the kind of situation they are in, they have their unique challenges. So let's look at that. We get this input from the report of Committee of External Affairs. So this is the key issues and recommendations of the committee. So here you have the issue, what the committee has observed, and along with that, of course, the solution, the suggestion which the committee has given. So first is data gaps on non-ECR migrants. Okay, so there is something called immigration check required. So there are a set of countries which fall under that, right? And most of the information, most of the data which the government has is on these kind of countries and the people who are going to these kind of countries. But there are people in other countries, the non-ECR migrants, they are excluded from a lot of the data which the government has. So the recommendation is to develop a comprehensive labor market information database which should cover everybody who is working in some part of the world. Then absence of a codified diaspora policy. So there is this concept which the External Affairs Ministry has, or as a part of, you can say, our foreign ideology, a diaspora ideology, that we have to care about them, we have to connect, we have to celebrate, and we have to contribute to them. But this is informal. So the recommendation is saying that you should have a specific policy document because you need to have greater engagement and address whatever issues they are facing in a more formal way. Then you have vulnerability of student migrants. So student migrants is a very big category of its own. I'm sure a lot of you also might be having aspirations to go and study abroad. So they are excluded from the immigration bill. So we have an immigration bill, so they are not a part of that. And they are actually very vulnerable because they're exposed to a lot of fraud by different agents and other people. So the recommendation is that they should be a part of the bill so that there is a formal process, there is a proper student outreach program so that they're not harassed. Then exploitation by private recruiters. Here, this also you might know that a lot of people who want to go abroad, they have to pay up a lot of money. There are, centers in different parts of the country where these services are provided, and it's usually at high cost. Some of them are illegal ways, and there are state-run agencies also which do the same thing, but they are highly underutilized. A lot of the people are not aware about them, so that's an issue. And the recommendation is that you should have a dedicated state-run recruitment agency, and this should also be like a bilateral labor agreement between different countries, which can happen through these state-run agencies. So that government assurance would be there and no misuse can happen. Then lack of support for returnees. Now, these days, there is also a lot of people who are coming back from different countries, a lot of people who have been pushed back also. So, they say around 6 lakh immigrants returned in 2019 to 24, but they are not able to reintegrate into the system. Okay, so here the recommendation is provide central grants and loans to states to sustain economic reintegration of these returnees. Then delay in transporting mortal remains. So see, there are religious rights involved here. When the person dies, even if he's dying in a different country, he would like to, have his last rites conducted in his country, be buried or cremated here. So here, the families face inhuman delay due to administrative clearance. So this process, they say, needs to be simplified and some discretionary powers should be allotted so that there should be no delay in these transportation of the mortal remains. So, very comprehensively, we've talked about issues facing the diaspora and some suggestions of the committee which can help in proper management of these issues. Then you have India and Oman signed comprehensive economic partnership agreement. So this is what we read about. We just had mentioned when we were talking about Bangladesh also. So India is really signing a lot of these trade agreements with different countries. So there is one which is being signed with Oman. So let's see what this agreement is saying. So this is going to get us market access. So we'll have access to Oman market. So Oman will provide access to about 98% of the tariff lines on zero duty. India has offered tariff liberalization on around 78% of its tariff lines. Oman has slightly higher, actually significantly higher, 98%. Then there is 100% FDI allowed for Indian companies in major service sector in Oman. See, India has an expertise on service sector. Service sector would be things like IT, healthcare, and in all of these areas, India is actually doing very well. Now, we want this industry to grow further. So, this agreement is allowing Indian companies to have 100% foreign direct investment, set up their businesses, their ventures in Oman. And the last is this is a first ever commitment on traditional medicines across all modes. So traditional medicines is very important. Like, we have this dedicated Ayush ministry which talks about different forms of traditional medicine. So this is an impetus. This is a push towards that and its acceptance in Oman. Okay, so which will further help in its growth. Now, one more aspect which is being highlighted here is that why is India seeking so many FTAs, free trade agreements with different countries? Why is India so keen on doing that? Because in the last few days, months, we've seen a lot of these free trade agreements. So, first is export diversification. You want Indian exports to grow and you want them to grow in different countries. You want to diversify them. So, because of that, free trade agreements can be very helpful. Then, when you have free trade agreements, it brings in FDI. And in a lot of sectors, India is now seeking FDI because for anything to grow, any technological upgradation, investment is always the tricky part. The way do you get investment from? So if you have proper trade relationships or free trade relationships, companies from different countries might have that inclination that because trade terms are favorable, they might invest in India. And with that, technology and innovation expertise will also come in. as I mentioned earlier also, leveraging strengths in service sector. Okay, so service sector will also, which is already doing very well, but that strength you want to utilize through these agreements, you want to expand it further. And of course, resilience against global shocks. See, you have different countries which are controlling a lot of trade, like US, for example, and they are recently in this race of putting in a lot of tariffs, which is creating unfavorable trade conditions. Now, if India can open itself up and have trading relationships with different countries, India can protect itself from like any reliance it has on one partner. So that partner, if that is not in the most kind mood, that will really disturb the balance. But if you have diversified yourself, that is something which can prevent if there is a global shock from any particular region. Now, there are a number of measures which India has taken to boost the exports. Let's look at those measures. So, first is remission of duties and taxes on exported products. So, what happens is people who are exporting goods, they actually get a refund on all the taxes and duties which they pay. That's the first scheme. Then you have a dedicated export promotion mission. After that, there is districts which are going to be set up as export hubs so that it can streamline all different aspects of exporting goods. And you, of course, have the foreign trade policy, which has recently been upgraded in 2023 to, have the whole assessment of the geopolitical situation and then create favorable conditions for boosting our exports. So this is about our main news items. Now let's look at the place in news. So the place in news today is Netherlands. Just take a look at this map. So this is a European nation. You can see the countries around it. You have Germany, you have Belgium, you have the North Sea on one side. And the reason why it's in news is that India is going to sign a defense agreement with Netherlands. So signing of that defense agreement or that defense association is something which is very crucial, and that's why this is in news. Going on further, we look at the quick updates. Different news which are not very significant from the point of view of the news, but of the concept or the organization or the term which is being used there. So we look into that aspect. First of all, we have the Competition Commission of India. You would have heard about the recent crisis of Indigo. So Indigo is the biggest player in terms of domestic airlines, and when they shut down their planes, the whole system kind of crashed, right? So the Competition Commission of India here is now going to examine if this was something which they did unfairly because they controlled the market. So this would be like an extortion kind of situation which they did. Did they try to misuse that or not, or why that happened? That is what the Competition Commission is going to examine. So this is a statutory body which is established under the Competition Act of 2002. Then the purpose of this commission is to protect the interests of consumers and ensure freedom of trade in markets of India. Next update is on hate speech. So the Karnataka Assembly has recently passed the Hate Crimes Prevention Bill 2025. Now, what this bill says is that it defines hate speech. You would have heard these terms, but there is always a need to refer it to a legal term, like what is the law talking about. So here, Karnataka's law says the expression of public view intended to cause injury, disharmony, enmity, hatred, or ill will against a person, group, or community on the grounds which can be religion, race, caste, gender, sexual orientation, language, any of these. But if there is a intention of creating damage, creating hatred, ill will, that is what would be classified as hate speech. Now in this it's important that of course constitution provides freedom of expression, but in that it's also mentioned that there can be reasonable restrictions. So if the cause is justified, that if the intent is wrong, then it can be reasonably restricted, like in this act. Okay, then Coal Controllers Organization. So this is under the Ministry of Coal, and its objective is to bring transparency, efficiency, and consumer protection in coal sector. Recently, it's been in news because it's talking about management of the wastes which come out of coal extraction. The washery it is called. So in that context, this organization, it is a dedicated body uh, which is now in news. Then you have autophagy. So it is a natural cellular process where cells remove and recycle damaged and dysfunctional components to maintain health and homeostasis. So your body has a specific mechanism which through which your body will remove anything which is damaging, which is non-functionable, and just throw it out of the body. It's going to be broken down and thrown out so that those harmful things, those damaged things don't create any problem. Now, this concept can be used for treatment of different diseases. Like if there is a disease in which there is nervous system related damage, if your body cells can actually remove these damaged cells, we would be able to solve or treat those diseases. So this is a concept, this is a kind of therapy or treatment which scientists are working on for different diseases like let's say Alzheimer's disease, in which there is destruction or damage to the nervous system cells. So they're trying to use this idea there. Then Commission for Air Quality Management. So this is in news because it's trying to look at the waste management in Delhi. So this is this is also a statutory body. So the act in which through which this body is created is the Commission for Air Quality Management in NCR and adjoining Areas Act. So it's just not just Delhi. So Delhi, Rajasthan, Haryana, UP. So all these parts, adjoining regions, for all of them together, you have this dedicated body for managing air quality. But it's not just limited to air. It can manage other kinds of wastes and issues. Like here, they're talking about solid waste management. Then you have freshwater sponges. So sponges are simple aquatic invertebrates which have porous bodies that filter water to obtain food and oxygen. Okay, so basically sponge is an organism, one of the most simplest kinds of organisms in the animal kingdom. So most simple animals, their characteristic is that they have pores. They have porous bodies. The name sponge should explain that, right? So it's like a sponge and it is porous. And what scientists are exploring here is that these pores, water will pass through them, their food passes through them. So they can actually be used to store heavy metals, to store impurities and pollutants. So that's a use which is being explored for freshwater sponges. Then anti-dumping duty. So this has been in news because India has imposed some anti-dumping duty on China recently, some steel goods from China. So what happens is that this is basically a trade remedy, a trade correction, where a country imposes when imports are sold below their normal value in international market. Right? So let's say the price of a good is 100 rupees. Okay, an international price is also similar to that value 100. But if a country starts selling its good into another country for let's say 30 rupees, value is 100 but they're selling it for 30. Now this is like they are just dumping. it. Whatever there is, they're not even interested in making profit, they're just dumping it or bulk. And that is damaging to the production which is happening in that own country. So the country's own goods are actually expensive than the goods coming from outside. So to balance that out, what that country does is it imposes some additional taxes, some additional duties, which are anti-dumping duties. That you're dumping this, so we're going to put in some extra tax on this so that the price becomes leveled. That is anti-dumping duty. Then small modular reactors. So India is talking about having small modular reactors, at least 5 by 2033 under the nuclear energy mission. Now, what is this small modular reactor? So this is the power of up to 300 megawatt per unit, which is about 1/3 of a traditional nuclear power reactor. See, a nuclear power reactor is a huge thing. It takes a lot of money, a lot of time to set this up. So they've created this small reactor, which might be quicker to set up and start production. Like they're saying, it's 1/3 of the size. So it can be easily done on a larger scale, larger number of reactors can be done. And being modular means you can make it in parts and then you can assemble it. Like maybe you've heard about the modular kitchen. It's assembled, it's built in parts. So the same thing will happen here. The reactor is built in parts and then it can be assembled. So that's what India is trying to do. India has very ambitious goals when it comes to growth of nuclear energy, and that would be met through setting up of these small modular reactors. Now, we've completed our discussion. Please open your news today, go through the whole news today. You'll get more clarity on our discussion. After that, go and solve the MCQs, the questions which are available to you. And if you want to read any more on any of these topics, or if you want further insight and update on these news or continuing issues, please visit our digital current affairs website of Vision Eyes. Thank you.